In this video, we will learn about an important concept in project appraisal, and that is the project life cycle. This can be better understood with the help of this flowchart. We can visualize this and try to make sense of it. This is the flowchart that suggests that there are various phases of a project's life. First is the identification, and then there is preparation and analysis, and then there will be appraisal, and then selection, approval, and financing. Then will come the implementation stage, and then monitoring and control. And finally, we have the evaluation stage. So let's try to understand these one by one. Here we will start with another example. This is basically an ADB's project life cycle, Asian Development Bank. You can see that there is a slight change, that it begins with the country strategy and program, because they are going to make a strategy for each country and they are focusing on that initially, and then they go towards the other stages that are usually there in any project life cycle. So it's not just ADB, that is an international financial institution. There are other international financial institutions like World Bank. So in case of World Bank, the project life cycle is slightly different. You can see that it is starting with the country assistance strategy, and then there is identification and preparation, appraisal, negotiations and board approval, and then implementation and supervision, because they need to supervise whatever is happening in the project, because they are the donor agency, or they are providing technical assistance, or some other organization is providing the technical assistance. So for all of that, there needs to be some supervision of if actually the project is working well, and then the implementation and the completion of the project, and then the evaluation. So you can pause the video and read all of these guidelines. We'll however shed more light on the slides that are coming ahead, and they will more or less explain the same thing, but we can understand that the project life cycle is basically conveying the same idea, and that we will explain, and there can be slight difference between the project life cycle of one IFI and another IFI. So let's start with the first step. The first step is of identification. It would help us to identify the project idea. It will allow us to find out the promising projects and requires imagination and stimulation of the flow of ideas. So imagination is required, and we need to stimulate the flow of ideas so that we could come up with some plausible idea or some project which is beneficial or desirable. Then there is the monitoring of the environment that can help us to come up with a good idea. So broadly speaking, these are the two channels through which we can come up the identification of the idea of the project. So we can delve deeper into these two dimensions. Let's see. So the first channel is about imagining and stimulating the ideas, and there is one method that is commonly used, which is known as the SWOT analysis, and has been there since 1960s. So it's a well-established tool, and it helps us to come up with a better idea. And for that, what we do is we focus on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats of the proposed project, and then we can come up with the a sound idea for solving a certain problem in the economy or the society. Strengths are there, and for example, strengths can be an example of it would be the resilience against the fever related diseases of the local population. Sometimes it happens that the certain population that we are trying to conduct a project for is naturally resilient or resistant towards any fever related diseases. For instance, in Pakistan, it was found that people are more resilient to COVID 19 because of perhaps the prevalent existence of fever related diseases like dengue fever and other kinds of fever, and extensive presence of mosquitoes. So, such things can develop some immunity level or resistance towards or against the fever related diseases. So, this can be a strength of a certain population that can help us to refine the idea. Weaknesses in a certain situation should also be considered. For example, if we consider a developing country or a labor surplus country where the population is high, we can expect that the population will be congested, and this can be a problem when it comes to the undertaking of a project. Providing facilities to such population can be a difficult thing, so it becomes a weakness of that certain population, and hence a barrier in providing the benefits. Lack of the law enforcement can be if it is weak, it can be a problem, because again, there will be more crime, and the benefits cannot reach to the people in an efficient way, and law should be um, should be enforced, and if it is not so, if it is weak, then it is considered as a weakness in that certain situation. And opportunities should also be highlighted. We can highlight the opportunities. For instance, if we undertake a certain project and that population is suffering with some health issues, it can provide us an opportunity to improve the situation of the health sector in that certain community. So wherever there is a problem, there can be some opportunity. So we should also try to analyze it from this angle, so that we better understood the situation and come up with a good identification of the idea. Threats are also there. The risk and uncertainty is also there in every situation, and war instead of a pandemic, for instance, can happen. If we prepare for a pandemic like COVID-19 or any other, we are not sure, and maybe a war uh, can take place, and due to that, it becomes a threat to our project, and this should also be considered, because unexpected things and unforeseen events can be a threat to the project that we are trying to design. So if we look at a certain situation from these angles, it is going to allow us to be more savvy about the situation, and hence we will be well educated to come up with a suitable idea for the project. We can also come up with good ideas by monitoring the environment. The environment in terms of the economy, the environment in terms of how the public sector is working, the environment of how the technological changes are taking place, the environment of how the socio-demographics are working in a certain country, the environment of the corporate sector of that economy, if it is performing well, or if it is allowed to perform well, and the environment related to the supplier sector, that is, what is the supply side situation. So if we consider all these things, we can come up with a good idea of a project. So in this way, the identification of a certain project can be done. Then we have preparation and analysis. This is the second phase in the project life cycle. So in preparation and analysis, we will make a feasibility study, a very brief document that sheds some light on the overall project, if it is going to be desirable or not. So it's a kind of concept paper in which we try to create a small document, a brief document, which is the introduction to the project that we are trying to design. Instead of making a complete and wholesome document in the beginning, we come up with a smaller document that should introduce us and the other stakeholders about the project. And then the preliminary screening can be done because at initial level the screening will be possible if we have such a document that should allow us to do the preliminary screening of the project. And once the preliminary screening is done, the detailed planning should be done for the projects that are more promising. And if we do so, it will be helpful in eliminating the less promising alternatives of achieving the same objective. We are acting as economists as well, so economists try to allocate the resources efficiently, and they would try to prune off the less promising alternatives. And this will happen if we have done the detailed working on the project. And then developing the compatibility with the physical and social environment. This will allow us to be able to create compatibility with the physical and the social environment, because the project is related with the physical existence, that is the material goods as well as the services, that is how the health is provided, how the education is provided. So in both of the sectors, both tangible and intangible, we have projects, and we have to create the compatibility of our analysis with that, so that we be able to internalize, include, assess, quantify both the physical side of the project as well as the intangible or social side of the project. Then we can also try to be consistent with the governmental priorities, because a project in development sector is undertaken usually by the public sector or for the public sector. And for that, if the governmental priorities are considered, then we will be moving in the direction of the overall national goals, where a national goal is to achieve a higher level of health or 100% literacy, etc. So preparation and analysis should also be focused on the governmental priorities in order to contribute to the overall goal of the government. So detailed planning, when we do this, we talk about the location of the project, how much area it is covering, and the population that will benefit from that project. We describe the details of the project. We also mention the objectives of the project, on the basis of which we will be having benefits and costs. And we also try to specifically quantify the objectives in the form of targets, where we have solid targets that we have and we want to achieve them, and we have some physical or um, qualitative units of those targets. Project scope is defined, that how what is the geographical extension or limit of this project, and what are the various limits or delimitations of the project. And then we have the cost estimates. This should be done because we are talking about the allocation of the resources, so we have to be sure of how much costs are being incurred. Financial plan should be developed because we have to incur the costs, so how the finances will be arranged and how they will be allocated is a question that we need to answer. And when it comes to financial plan, financial phasing is another question, that how we will spend the cost on a yearly basis or any other unit of time, that is quarterly basis or biannual or monthly basis. So financial phasing is also a time related aspect that we need to consider here. So in this detailed planning, we also include the physical scheduling of the activities. We should know that how the physical activities are happening, and we schedule them in a way that we are well aware of their progress over time. For instance, activities, they are plotted, and we can observe that how the various activities are happening over time. Now, period of implementation should also be considered, how much of the time will be required to implement the project, and the completion will be achieved after the implementation. And finally, the appointment of consultants. We might have local consultants, we might have foreign consultants. So this aspect should also be considered, that how the various consultants are to be appointed, their competency in their recruitment, etc., their remunerations, these aspects are to be covered. The third stage in this process is appraisal. In appraisal, as we are already aware of this word, it's about bewaring or awareing the people. So now we will be having some kind of answers that can guide the people in making the decision. In this phase, we cover the different aspects of the project. They can be engineering aspect, they can be environmental, physical, financial, economic, social. So all these aspects are covered in this stage. And then the data, this is the collection of the data happens, and we take care of the data that we have collected. And then it is actually used to make the calculations. The assumptions are also set because there are things in the future that we cannot fathom in current point in time. So we have to make assumptions. For example, that how traffic will increase over the next 5 years is a question we cannot answer definitely. So we have to make an assumption that the traffic will increase, for example, 5% in the next year. So these assumptions, they are also there in the process of appraisal. Once the data is collected, assumptions are set, we are in a position to make the analysis, and that is done by using the specific tools of appraisal. These include NPV and they include IRR and such other tools. These are used to appraise. So once we have done this appraisal, now we are able to give some information to the decision makers who are in the ministries, and they are taking the decisions of a certain, if the certain project is to be undertaken or not. So we have provided them with our input, so they will help to they will basically be helped by us, and they will try to make the selection, and they will approve it or they may reject it. This is the other possibility, because rejection is also a possibility. And then if it is selected, then definitely approval will happen, otherwise rejection will happen. And once the approval is done, the financing is then considered. In the last step, we did some details of the financing. Now it is time that we actually do the financing. Either it can be borrowed capital, or it can be equity capital. And then we are able to get the funds, they are released, and then the implementation is the next step that will be possible if the funds are released. And in the implementation, as the name goes, it is about the actual process in which we begin the project, we initiate the project in physical terms, and if it is done, if in the last step the project is selected and is found to be feasible, and it is approved. So then the monitoring and control phase comes, and it is about the observation of if the project is being undertaken in the planned way, or if there are some lapses. This is important because we want to do the timely completion of the project. So if we do this, this will be helpful in getting the project completed within time, which is important from various angles. That is, this is the funds allocation is for a certain time period. There are stakeholders who are looking for the benefits of that project, and the need of the time is also important. For example, if the COVID-19 project is completed within time, it will allow the people to benefit from the project. Otherwise, if the project gets delayed, the COVID-19 may disappear, and then the benefit of the project would not be as much as we wanted it. So another important thing to remember in this stage is that we will use some tools, some graphical tools, out of which one is the Gantt chart. And in the Gantt chart, we undertake this process of monitoring the progress of various activities. We just had a brief glimpse of that before. Here I'm going to make it again, time and the activities. So how various activities are happening over time is something we can monitor from here. And finally we have evaluation stage, and the evaluation is the final stage because the project is now developed and it is functioning. So we want to make sure that the benefits and the costs that we targeted are actually realized. So ex ante evaluation is done. It is the evaluation which is done before the project, and the other opposite of it is the ex post evaluation or terminal evaluation. This is the evaluation which is done after the project is completed. And in the middle we have ongoing evaluation, which is about the time period between ex ante evaluation and ex post evaluation, so that we are continuously aware of the materialization of the benefits and the costs that we are spending. So it's a very wholesome way of an analysis if we conduct these three types, but it also involves some cost, these types of analyses. So a careful examination should be done before undertaking these evaluation strategies. Cost is to be considered. We might do one analysis or two analyses instead of all three analyses, depending upon the gravity of the situation and the funds that we have and the information and uncertainty we have. And now the indicators we can use to evaluate a certain project. In order to be able to evaluate a project, we have to address the physical side of the project, that how much of a road is constructed, how much of the exports are increased. These are various questions that are physical in nature, and if we are able to answer these questions, it is an important side of any project, because no matter a project is giving us intangible benefits or services, there is a side which is physical in its infrastructure and in its machinery, in its building, in terms of other tools that are being used. So physical assessment should be done, and for that there should be some physical achievement indicators depending upon the situation, the examples of which are given here. Then the output or impact indicators are also required, that how much of the change has been brought in terms of impact, that for example how much environmental degradation has happened. So we can do the impact analysis of that, and that for that we need to use the impact indicators. Economic indicators is another kind of indicators that are suitable and can be used whenever we are evaluating a certain project. It can include the microeconomic variables as well as macroeconomic variables of income, employment, increase in exports or decrease in imports, increase in output, etc. So we can use these indicators to come up with a better understanding of how the project has performed. And to further evaluate, we can also incorporate social indicators, the impact on the society which is likely to be intangible in nature, that how the uh, frame of mind of the people have changed, how their awareness has changed, how much they are satisfied or dissatisfied. These are the things that we can try to include. It can also include environmental indicators, that how much of the environment has changed, and if it has brought improvement or if it has brought deterioration for the society. So these are the indicators that we can use in order to be able to evaluate a project. So going through these steps, we can say that we have conducted an inquiry which is very well rewarding in terms of information about the project that we are undertaking. So when we complete the process of evaluation, evaluation can give us ideas and lessons for the new projects, and we can learn a lesson from the evaluation, There might be some lacks in the physical outcome of the project, or the social outcome of the project, or the economic output, or any other project related output of the uh, project. So these are the lessons, our mistakes, all of these things can help us to make a new idea, a better idea, or some knowledge that can be used whenever the next project is undertaken. So when we have new ideas, we have greater knowledge, we can reinitiate the same process. That is, if we go back to this diagram, this will allow us to see this phenomenon, that we are starting from this place and then we are coming back to this place. Similarly, in this case, we are seeing that there is a cycle. It is not ending. And in this diagram as well, there was a cycle. It started from here and it, reached this point again. So this is why we call it a cycle, because it ends where it started. And this process can continue, and it can benefit uh, in in a uh, in a cyclical way, where the new ideas are generated, better ideas are generated, lessons are learned, and sequence of a project can be generated because we learned a lesson from a last project, a new idea was there, so we can undertake another similar project in some other capacity or in some other area. So in this way it's a cycle, because it is reinitiating and it is reaching the point from where it started. So this is why we call it a project life cycle, and it is very universal and it holds for every project. Thank you.